letting me know. So today we're making this pot holder to get some of my stuff out of your way here. Or out of my own way, I guess it would be, wouldn't it? Okay, so we're making the pot holder with the 4 borders around. Okay, and I did put a list of fabrics up on my Facebook page, but let me go over them again. So this middle section, let me move up a little ways. Well, let me see if I can, let's have a little camera adjustment here. I'm going to bring that down, bring the machine further down, and let's turn ourselves a little up. I don't want to be off too far. Back up a little bit. Here we go. I know you can see further back, but that's okay. So here let's not get everybody confused. That would be me getting everybody confused. Okay. So we're making the pot holder with the 4 borders, and I put 2 different fabrics this time so you can see that there's 2 different pieces here, not one piece in the back. And hi Rhonda, and hi Nancy, and Nancy and Rhonda. Okay, so our list of supplies or fabrics. This middle fabric is 7 by 7, 7 inches by 7 inches. Okay, the borders are 1.5 inch wide, and you can always make them wider, and you'll see as we go along. 1.5 inch wide, and since this is 7 inches, we need 2 borders that are 1.5 by 7, because they'll go on first. And then we're going to have a top and bottom border, so they have to go out and cover this part here. So we want those 1.5 by 9 inches. Okay. Then our back fabrics, and yours would be the same or not, doesn't matter. But the back fabric, the top is 9 inches across, so it's 6 by 9. And the 6 part is going to be folded in half, and I'll show you that as we go along. And the bottom part is 8 by 9. If you want to fold this back so there's not a raw edge here, just add 1 inch on there so you can make it 9 by 9, but you need to remember to fold it back. And maybe I'll cut mine 9 by 9 today so you can see it. And I'm going to put this right here so you can see what we're working on. Okay. Then we need a piece of batting that's 9.5 by 9.5, and a piece of Insulbright that's 9.5 by 9.5. Now today, mine's going to be a little, can you see it's just a little bit smaller here? So I don't want to throw this away and not use it. So my pot holder may end up being just like maybe a 1/2 inch smaller. It's okay, but I'm going to use up this extra piece that I have. So go ahead and get your Insulbright cut and your batting cut. I'm going to use these fabrics. I got 2 fat quarters. So this is going to be my center fabric, and this is going to be my border fabric. And it's a fat quarter I have. So before I cut it, because you can see all the folds in it, I'm going to go ahead and give it a little press. Hi, Lynn. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a press. And you're going to go ahead and cut your fabrics. If you need to press anything, make sure you get it all pressed and ready. We need sewing thread for sewing our pot holder together, but we're going to start out with whatever thread we want to quilt with, because we're going to go ahead and do, can you see it? See the little squares? So we're going to go ahead and do our quilting first. So that's the first thread you need in your machine. And your bobbin can be your regular sewing thread, that's fine, because it's not going to show. So let's start getting our pieces cut. So you're going to go ahead and cut your batting and your insel bright to 9.5 by 9.5. And I'm just doing a little bit of pressing. I have my little iron today so that when we get making the pot holder, I can bring my little mat and iron over to the workspace where the camera is and show you how I do some pressing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my center. And I'm just going to take my fat quarter and I'm going to cut out a square over on this corner. Let me move the sewing machine for now and move that up so that you can see. I'm sorry I was a little late today. I had to work and teach a machine embroidery class, and it took a little longer than I thought it would. And I didn't want to rush anybody, so I'm going to go 7 inches across my mat. Now my mat, let me go back a little bit for you. Nope, that's as far back as I'm going to get, I guess. So my mat, I just have my little mat that's 12 by 12. So when I put my fabric on, I can't always see all my numbers. So I want to see the number going across the top 7, because I can take my ruler and come down to the 7. So let's see, 7. Okay, so I have 7 across, and I've got my ruler coming down into the fabric 7 inches. Okay, I can also start to cut. Let me see if I can do it so you can see. I'm going to start the cut going across this way. I didn't quite get to my edge. Okay, so you can see how I've come in a little bit this way. So I can now turn this. I could measure across 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I really want to have this fairly straight. You know, it's a pot holder, not your prom dress. So it's okay if it's not perfect. It's not a quilt. Okay, so let me just set that fabric aside. So this is my center. Okay, I've given it a press and a little best press. I'm going to take my border fabric, and that needs to be pressed. And what I'll do in this case is, let me give it a little press because I want to show you how I do this to get the most out of my fabric. So if you're wondering why I didn't have my fabric all pressed ahead of time, it's because I did, but then I changed my mind what I wanted to use. Have you ever done that when you're working on a project or starting a project and you think you've decided what you're doing, and then at the last minute you just change your mind? So I say, if you change your mind, go with it. Don't say to yourself, oh, I can't change my mind now, I have to use this. Because whatever you're making, you're not going to like it as much because you wished you did it in the other fabric choice. So I say, just change your mind. It's okay. Okay, so I want to set this aside so I don't cut it by accident. Okay, so here's my fat quarter. And a fat quarter generally should be at least 18 inches across. So here's my salvage, this little piece down here. So 18 inches across this way, which would be 18 inches is a half yard if I was cutting all the way salvage to salvage. When they cut a fat quarter, they go ahead and cut 18 inches salvage to salvage, and then they cut that piece in half, okay? Which would make it, now it depends on the bulk of fabric. It could be, this could be 20, could be 21, could be 22. That's not where you buy the fat quarters fault. That's how, whatever it is off the bulk. So they just take it, cut it in half. So 2 halves of a half a yard of fabric is a quarter yard and a quarter yard. They call it a fat quarter because normally a quarter yard is 9 inches across this way. And then the length of the salvage to salvage, the width of fabric. Okay, so the fat quarter means that it got to be wider, but it's shorter, but it's still a quarter of a yard of fabric. And the reason people might want the fat quarter is they might need more of the width or more of towards a square than they do 9 inches wide. If you're doing strips for something, well, then you'd want the quarter yard because number one, it's cheaper to buy. The fat quarter is more expensive. So it's cheaper to buy, but it gives you the length that you need. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So when I look at this fat quarter, the most fabric, the length, is longer this way than it is this way. So if I come along and I start cutting off this, or down here across this way, I've lost that length that I might need later. So I try to save as much length as I can for another project that I may be doing. And it really depends on your project, whether you're able to do that. So I folded my fat quarter in half. My salvage is down here. And I need 1.5 inch strips. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure this edge is straight. So right-handed on this side, left-handed on this side. And I'm just going to trim a little of it off. And I'm going to use that fold because my fold is even. And I'm just going to trim a little of this off. So now I know I have a nice straight edge here. Then you can either lift your fabric up or turn it around on your cutting mat because now you've got to cut from the other direction. And I need 1.5 inch strips. So I'm going to line my ruler up 1.5 at this edge and cut. Now I've got this, and I'm not going to move this fabric yet. So I've got this, let me see, fabric is cut in half. And if I measure it, this is actually a 22 inch because it's 11 inches and I've got it folded over. So it's 22 inches. So I need 9 and 9 and 7 and 7. So 9 and 9 is 18, 7 and 7 is 14. So can I get them all out of that? You guys get your math out. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this over. And I'm going to do it without math. So see, I have a little salvage edge there. I'm just going to trim that off. And I'm going to move it down because this isn't salvage on this side. I don't want to lose that because I might need that little 1/2 inch or so. But I'm going to take my salvage off before I even start, just so I don't forget about it. Okay? And I'll give you a minute to catch up too. So now I'm gonna put these ends back together. So here's my 2 raw edges. My fold is down this end. And I'm gonna cut from this direction because I don't want to move this. So I'm gonna make sure that I've got my strip. Oh, hold on. You can see we're not cracked quite in the window. Let me move over a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I'm lining up my strip with the line of my mat. My 2 raw edges are down here equally together. So the first I need is 2 strips. I always cut the longest ones first, so I need 2 9s. Okay, so because I have the fabric folded in half, and I'm going to bring my edges down on my mat, and I'm just going to count up 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to lay my ruler down. Make sure my ruler is straight, and my ruler needs to be straight with my strip, not straight with the mat, though if your strip is lined up with the mat, it would be straight. Before I cut, I'm going to look at my instructions. Okay, 9 inches. I'm going to again count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and I'm going to cut. And the reason I do that is this is the folded piece. So now instead of having 2 short pieces, I've got 1 longer piece. I can't use it for this project, but I might be able to use it for something else. So here's my 2 9-inch strips. Okay. Now this time, I only need 14 inches, right? Yeah, because I need 2 7s. So I could go up 1.5 and over 14, which depends on how much fabric I got left. And I would just cut that. But I'm going to go ahead and cut the strip 1.5, because a 1.5-inch strip could be something that you use often enough. Okay, and now I'm going to be done with this fabric for now. Okay, because I haven't done my back yet, but we're going to get the front done first. So now again, I'm going to cut that. See the salvage? I'm going to cut that salvage off. Before I do anything. Okay, I need 2 7s. So again, raw edges together, fold is down here. I want to make sure that when I lay the 2 fabrics on top of each other, that they're even. Okay, so I've lined it up with the edge of my mat so I can make sure I'm staying even. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to 7. Okay, put my ruler down. I'm going to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to go ahead and cut. Now, see this piece I have left over. So that's a good size piece of fabric. So there's my 2 strips, okay? So how many of you are sewing along with me today? Can't do a show of hands, so let's do a check-in, I guess, in the chat. If you're sewing along, just type in sewing or cutting. Maybe you're cutting along, but you're not sewing along. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and get your fabrics cut. I'm going to take the 2 fabrics that I don't need and put them somewhere else, because I don't want to pick this up and go, oh shoot, I cut that the wrong size. Because it will happen. Okay, so Christine, you're sewing along good. Lynn, Rhonda and Nancy, are you guys going to sew along? Or are you having a little refreshments and just watching along? I could go for refreshments because I came straight from teaching that class to setting the camera up, and I was a little late. I made it home in time, but I was a little late. Oh, good, you are. I was a little late because for some reason my camera software felt the need to update. And then after it updated, it couldn't find the camera. So then, you have to shut the computer off and all that stuff. You know how that goes. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put my walking foot on. Now, I know I don't really have to. Now, I have a baby lock brother, so I have the baby lock, and it has a pretty good feeding system. But I'm going to go ahead and put my walking foot on. So I've got my smaller machine, so it has a mechanical walking foot. I know some of you have the bigger machine, bigger walking foot that plugs in the back, and that's pretty easy to get that on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let me move this over, and let's see how close I can get so that you can see. Okay, now I'm going to put this on the floor, so you guys got to remind me what I did with it. And let me bring the machine over. And I know, let's see if I can, I know that's not too bad. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. I guess instead of bringing the machine over, it would have been easier to zoom, wouldn't it? Okay, so let's see if I can bring that. And I know the machine casts its own shadow here. Okay, so a walking foot, I have to take my foot and ankle off. So let's see if I bring the camera down. Hold on one second. I know you can't see much yet, so it's 2 adjustments I have to do. And let's see if I come in a little further. Oh, well, we're really in there now. How's that? Okay, and like getting as much light there as I can. And again, I know the machine casts a shadow. Okay, so now we're really close up, aren't we? So let me get the walking foot out. I don't think you need to see me take it out of the package. Now the walking foot, some walking feet, depends on the walking foot, come with these fabric guides. We're not going to use those today. We're gonna do it the old-fashioned way and draw lines. So let me get that all out of the way. And lift my foot up. And let me see if I can put that light. I'm trying to put the light so it lights up, but the light isn't too much in your way. That's not too bad. So I'm going to take my foot and ankle. My foot is here. My ankle is right here. The ankle is the part the foot hooks onto, just like in human beings. I don't take my ankle off with no foot attached because that's a good way to lose it. Okay, ask me how I know that. So okay, ankle, foot. So I don't take them apart when I take my ankle off. Whenever I take my ankle off, I make sure it has a foot on it because it's not so easy to lose that. And if you're really good, you set it inside of your accessory tray and remember that you put it there. So the walking foot has this little, let's see, there we go, has this little fella right here. Because this walking foot is mechanical. Well, this piece goes around where the screw is for your needle. So the screw is on the right side for putting a new needle in. So this, it has to go around that. So the screw area for the needle will go right in there. And then if you look, see if I can get it out of the way. This part here is what goes around the shaft of your machine, the same as your ankle did. And that little spot there is where the screw is. And you see how this is open on this end. Well, that means you don't have to take your screw all the way out of the shaft of the machine and lose it or have a hard time getting it back in. So I'm gonna bring it around to the back, and I'm gonna hold up. Here's that little piece. Remember I told you that it needs to go up and down with the needle. So I'm going to get I'm going to put my foot down. Well, I thought I was going. I can't get my foot underneath that if I do. Okay, so I want to make sure that I get this part around the needle screw first. I'm coming from the back. I'm way back here, coming forward. So I have that little arm is going around my needle, and I'm trying to do it from this angle. I'm having a hard time here. Okay. Oh, let's see. Okay. And yes, it takes a minute, and it's a little harder when you're trying to go slow and demo it. I had to open my screw up. I had to loosen my screw a little bit more. So I have that little thing that was like this, that goes, what goes, yeah, like that goes around the shaft. And I've got that lever, that little arm that goes up and down. The, the needle, the needle screw area is in that. So I'm going to tighten this up with my fingers first, and then tighten it the rest of the way with my screwdriver. Okay, and now I'm on there nice and tight. I don't think I can get in. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think I can get in any closer than that without really messing the whole camera situation up. So I'll give you a minute to get your walking foot on. If you don't have one, that's okay. You're going to find that if you do a lot of quilting, potholders, table runners, placemats, mud rugs, anything like that, that you have a sandwich, so that's a fabric, batting, and fabric, then you're really going to want to have a walking foot. And I'll tell you that they're not cheap, but if you take care of yours, it should last, you know, for as long as you, it'll last as long as you do. Okay, so let me just back up now. Oops, sorry. Okay, maybe I can stay right there and so. Okay. Okay. So what I need to do now is I'm going to take my batting, okay? Not my Insul Bright, just my batting, okay? Gotta put my screwdriver away. So Baby Lock has this little round screwdriver that comes with most machines, and it fits perfectly. So my bobbin winder is right up here, and this fits perfectly sitting right on that bobbin winder so I don't lose it. I will say that you want to remember that it's there, because if you try to put a bobbin on to wind it, it's not going to go on right. And let's make sure we have our pins and pin cushion, everything we need close by, and whatever your thread you're going to quilt with. So I'm looking for my pink thread. And, oh, you know what? I should just go with white. Because if I use this pink, which is probably what I would use, you won't be able to see it as well. So let me pick a white. And if you heard all that rattling, I had a big bottle full of thread, and I just dumped it all out. So today I'm going to use embroidery thread, machine embroidery thread. Okay, so I'm going to clip my thread up here, because I never pull my thread backwards, it goes forward, because that's how the internal tensions and stuff are made for things to go forward. If you start pulling back, you're going to break threads up inside your tensions, and then there's a service call for you. And why spend money on a service call when you can spend it on fabric? Right? Right. So on this particular machine, before I get started on any machine I put this foot on, I'm going to turn my wheel with no thread. I want to make sure my foot's down. I want to turn my wheel to make sure that nothing's banging anywhere, because if I, you know, that little lever that goes up and down on the needle side, well, if you had that underneath where the needle screw area is, then it would jam and not be, the wheel wouldn't be able to turn the whole way down. So you don't want to find that out by stepping on your pedal, because again, that could be painful. Oh, Stephanie, you're watching and not sewing. That's okay. It's a good afternoon to sit back, have a glass of wine. I don't know, eat some popcorn and watch us sew. Okay. So I turn my wheel to make sure, and I turn it, my wheel over here. You see my hand is over here. So on the right side of your machine, your hand wheel, I'm going to turn that a couple times. And the reason I say a couple times, because some of you get a little apprehensive and you turn it a little bit, but you don't turn it all the way. I want to see my needle, my needle bar for the where the screw goes, come all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. I want to do it while I have no thread in here, because if I had thread, I'd be jammed up now with my bobbin thread because there's no fabric there. So, anybody have any questions on that? So I'm going to go ahead now on this machine. I'm going to use my needle up down to make sure my needle is in the right, at the right height to use my threader. So if I have a threader that pulls down here, a lot of people have a threader that pulls down here, or you have the plunger on the side, you always want to use your needle up down feature to make sure your needle is in the proper place for threading your needle, because that little tiny hook wire that is on your threader has to get through the eye of that needle, and it's very fine. And an automatic threader of any sort does not work on a needle that's lower than a 70. Okay, and I'm stitching with top stitch 80 12 is what I'm stitching. So I want to make sure my needle's in the proper place, because if you bend that little wire, you know, there's another expense for you. So today is all about saving money on repairs to spend on fabric. That's our theme for today. And I want to make sure my foot is up, because if my foot isn't up or my machine isn't turned on, my tensions, which are in here, my tension discs, sort of like cymbals, they're not open. So if my machine is off, they're not open. And if my foot is down, they're not open. Now, when you turn your machine on, in some cases you turn the machine on, but it's not really activated yet. You're just getting like a screen of pretty pictures or something. Make sure you hit your screen and activate it, which you'll hear your machine kind of make some noise moving around. Then you know your tension discs are open. When I get to this point, I haven't gone into my thread yet. I'm just going to put my finger on my thread, like say step on it, and I'm just going to give it just a slight tug, and you'll feel it move, and now it's set into those tensions. So your threader does work with the walking foot on it. And I'm just going to take my thread, because it was up on my walking foot, and I'm just going to put it under my foot like I normally would. Okay? The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the right stitch on. So my default stitch is 2.5. I think if you have a Janome, I think it's 2.0. So whichever it is, mine's 2.5, I'm going to go up to 3. I need a little more thread to get through my batting and my fabric than if I just had 2 fabrics. So if I left my tension at my regular sewing tension, my stitches would be smaller. Okay? So you can go 3.0, 3.5. It's up to you how you want it to look. Okay? So maybe with this white thread in, because I don't think you can see the actual length of the stitches. Maybe you can. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to change my length to 3. Okay? Now, if you have an electronic machine, you change the stitch length, doesn't hurt anything, because if you shut your machine off or you go to a different stitch, when you go back to the stitch that you're on now, it'll be back to its default. So what I want to do now is I want to have my 7-inch piece centered in my batting. Okay, so see, I want the same distance all the way around. And try not to get out the, the tape measure and the, the abacus and everything, because it's just a potholder. Okay, so I want the same distance all the way around, roughly. And I'm just going to put a pin in. Let me see if I can back up a little more here. Oh, oh, I got to move my machine back over a little bit. I used up my space here. So I'm just going to put a pin on each side. So do you see how I am there? See my pin? Okay. Well, I'm going to put just one for now, because the next thing we have to do is mark this. Okay. So I'm going to use a friction pen, which is a heat erase pen. And I will warn you on those that they weren't made for fabric. So they were made for paper. So you always want to test your fabric before you use it. Okay, I can tell you probably on a batik, it's not going to like it. It'll press away. So if you were using a blue one or a green one, it would press away the color, but then you'd have a white streak and that's the chemical. And sometimes it goes away in the wash, sometimes it doesn't. So I would just be careful there. So, or you could use a chalk fabric marker, just as long as it's a fabric marker. You don't want to use a Sharpie. And when you grab your pens, your marking pens, make sure you don't have a Sharpie, because as I can attest to, the Sharpie is permanent. So when you go to iron it away and it doesn't go away, just look over and go, oh yeah, that was my Sharpie, wasn't it? So ink pens and Sharpies, as a rule, don't come in my sewing area. Pens never do. So what I want to do is I want to, well, isn't that pretty? Can you see that? That was a project I did yesterday with Mylar. I don't have it with me, so I can't show it to you. But we'll do Mylar one day. Okay, so I got more stuff in my way again. Okay, so what I want to do is, oh, I know my problem is I lowered the camera down, didn't I? Now I got to put it back up. So let me do that. Let me bring it back up. And let me tilt it back down. There, how's that? That's a little better, isn't it? Let me move this a little more out of the way, because I can go over there a little ways. Okay, so this is 7 inches across, odd number. So I want to find the center, which would be 3.5. I heard you, Lynn. Or was that Chuck in the background? So I'm just gonna make a mark at the edge of my fabric right here at 3.5. See, just a little mark right near my pen. And I'm going to do the same thing, and I'll do it this way. On the bottom, 3.5, and make a mark. So can you see? Well, it doesn't show well, does it? There it is. See my little mark right there? And then I have one right next to my pen. Hopefully you can, there you go, just right there. Okay, I don't want to start my first line in the middle. I'm going to go my little squares, because then I would have a square in the middle, and I'd have to be more perfect about it. So if I don't use the middle starting point, I'm going to go 1/2 inch in either direction, which will give that, I should say this, if I said that backwards. If I drew the line in the middle, then my first square would be to the right of the middle and then left of the middle. So I'm going to go, so my square itself, not the line of stitching, but the empty square will be in the middle rather than having that line in the middle. Hope that makes more sense to you. And you can do it either any way you want because it's your pot holder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler 1/2 inch. I'm going to put that 1/2 inch mark on my ruler on those 2 marks I had just made. Okay? And I'll try to do mine fairly dark so you can see them. When you're doing it yourself, you don't have to write like you can see it from down the street. Okay, so I drew a line. I'm going to just turn it around, and I should be a 1/2 inch. If I check my ruler, 1/2 inch on that first, those 2 little lines I marked in the beginning, my line I just drew should be on the 1 inch. Okay. So now I've got my center done. Now I'm just going to go 1 inch over, draw a line, 1 inch over, and I'm trying to stay straight because God knows I can't sew straight. And I have just about 1 inch left. Well, I don't need to be stitching out here on the edge of my fabric. That's where my seam allowance is going to be. And even if I had 1.5 inches or probably less than 1.5 inches, I wouldn't worry about it. I'm going to end here because this is going to be like a 1/2 inch seam allowance coming in. So I'm just going to turn this around. And now I'm going the other way. And remember, we're using 1 inch. We did a 1/2 inch from the marks at the center to give us a 1 inch square. And the rest is 1 inch. Hope I didn't say that in confusion now. Okay, and I don't really care if I've got a little less on this side and a little more on this side of what's left after the last line. Let me draw this line again because it's not very dark. Okay, so here's what we have. Okay, lines all the way across. Okay, and so I'm going to give you a minute to get that done. And if you're done, we're going to go on have the lines that we just drew on the horizontal. Okay, everybody doing all right? If you have any questions? Okay, let me just see if there's any questions in the comments. No? So now I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to measure across. Okay, let me do it. I'll do it facing you. I'm going to have my ruler going across. See, here's the lines I drew horizontal because now we have to do vertical. So I want to go ahead and mark. So I'm going to come up higher. And I'm going to mark at the 3.5 again. I'll make it really big this time. See it? So I marked right on the batting because why? Doesn't matter. It's okay. Going to the other side. 3.5. See? See the 2 big marks? So I'm going a 1/2 inch to either side of that mark. Put my ruler down. The 1/2 inch is on the 2 marks that I just drew. And the reason I draw 2 of them is so I can connect hopefully with a straight line. Okay. Then I'm going to turn it around and do a 1/2 inch again on those 2 marks I made, which now the 1 inch mark on my ruler should match up that line I just drew. Okay. Now that I have my 1 inch center, see, 1 inch center, see how I got squares now? Now I'm going to just go and keep going. Put whatever line you just drew on, draw another line. And again, yours doesn't have to be really dark. You just need to be able to follow it along. So if you have a little couple places where it didn't mark, that's fine. You just kind of head to the next part that you can see. Turn it around. 1-inch mark on the line I already drew. Now I know my pin is in the way, and that's okay. I'm going to go to the 1 inch, and I'm going to draw my line. So here's my pin is right here. So I'm just going to draw up from my pin and then down from my pin. I don't want to keep taking pins in and out because then your fabric's going to shift. Okay? Make sure your friction pen, if you're using one or whatever you're using, you close it so it doesn't dry out. So now we have our grid. Can you see it okay? Whoops, sorry. There we go. We have our grid. Okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put a pin, one pin on each side, on each middle side. So just about wherever you drew those marks. Just to try to keep things flat. If you want to spray with your, you know, in embroidery, we use a temporary spray adhesive. If you want to do that, you can. You could tape it, but just remember that tape is going to pull on that batting, and we still need to use this batting as batting because we got to put our strips on. Stephanie, you're getting a pedicure while you're watching? Well, that's cool. That'll be a first. Now everybody's going to be all envious of you. Okay, so now we're ready to stitch. Got our walking foot on, check. Got with thread in that we're going to use for our quilting, check. Top stitch needle, 80, 80-12, check. If you don't have a top stitch, use a microtex, but I would prefer a top stitch. I rarely ever use a universal needle because the universal needle, the tip of it is a little bit rounded and I don't want that, okay? So you got your stitch, you want a straight stitch. You could do a curvy stitch, and maybe another time we'll quilt with a curvy stitch. But today it's a straight stitch. If your normal default on your stitch is length is 2.5, make it 3.0. You could go to 3.5. The higher you go, the faster the fabric moves, and that takes a little getting used to. So I'd rather you today just go up a half number. So if your machine is a 2.0, then you would go to 2.5. In my case, mine's a 2.5, so I'm going to 3. I'm going to move this in a little closer so I can reach it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the middle. So I'm going to be stitching to the right of this pin. See that pin there? But because I'm using my walking foot is wider, takes up more room. So I'm just going to move this pin over. So it's clearing, it's plenty enough away from my foot. Now, I can start stitching on the batting, but I want to make sure enough of my fabric is underneath my foot that my fabric doesn't flip up as my foot comes along, okay? But you don't have to be like exactly at the edge of your fabric, but close to it. And I'm going to stitch at a moderate speed. Now on my walking foot, it has two, what would I call them? Toes. It has two toes because it's a foot, right? Two metal pieces, and there's a little space in between. So I'm watching, I can see my needle in between these two. So that's my guide. I can see my needle hitting that line. So I'm looking before my foot because that's where I should be. If I'm looking at my needle, sometimes it's too late. So I'm just making sure that as this line goes along, that I'm steadying it to be right in the center of my foot. And I think you can hear my machine to know what kind. I'm not going at a fast speed. I have to move this pin because my foot is, like this wide. So I just got to move my pin over. So I'm just going to keep this nice and flat. and just move my pin over. When I get to the other end, I can stitch just off the fabric onto the batting. I don't want to lock my stitches because I don't want to have a lot of bumps on my batting. Because we're going to be putting a border on going across, when we go across with our stitching, that's going to lock all the rows of quilting that we do. So I just need to cut my thread. Oh, I have to put my pivot on. And I'm going to turn around because I want to go in the opposite direction. So now I can take that pin off. Oh, sorry, I have to put my pins away as I go, sorry. So my stitching, I went up this way, now I want to come back down. If you have a machine that has the pivot feature, and the pivot feature means when I take my foot off the pedal, my needle will go into the fabric and my foot will come up a little bit so I can pivot or straighten myself out. And then I just have to hit my foot pedal and it'll just start going again. I don't have to come back here and keep raising and lowering my foot. So if you have pivot, use it. Again, I'm going to stitch just a tad off of the fabric. Okay, and I can get rid of this needle now. I'm still going to leave these out here on left and right because I don't want things flopping around. So I came down this side. Now I'm going to go over to the left side of that first stitch and I did and come down again. Okay, so I went down one way and then I went back on either side of that first one in the opposite direction. So now I'm going to turn again and I'm just going to go to the next marking out from where I stitched last. Now as I come by this pin, I'm going to go ahead and take it out. Then I'm not turning my fabric. I'm just going to go over to where my next marking from my row of stitching is. And I have another row to do on this side. My pin is still in, but it's far enough away from where I'm stitching again. Okay, I have one line left, so this time I'm going to pivot. I'm going to stop when I get near that pin and take the pin out. Stop. I don't need to be going over my pin because there's another repair. You know, you're lucky sometimes if you make it over the pin, other times not so much. Okay? So now, here's all my stitching coming down. Now we're going to go in the other direction and we're going to do the exact same thing. Now don't worry if you're, let me show you a place if I can. If let me see, right here, I think. Can you see? Oh, sorry. My marking isn't exactly where my stitching is. It's just a little off. It doesn't matter because we're going to iron away and get rid of the markings. No one will ever know, and you don't need to tell them. Okay, so now we're going to go in the other direction. And again, we're going to start either the left, right side of that center mark we have. And I kind of hold my fabric out so I don't want it to like bunch up on me, okay? But your machine should be doing the work. I'm not pushing and pulling it. If you're back here pulling your fabric, you need a new machine. That was pretty straightforward, wasn't it? And a little side note for you. So we've come down, we're going to turn, and we're going to go to the right or left of the line we just stitched on. If you buy a machine in Walmart, I don't know if Kmart has them, so Walmart, Joann's, Amazon, online machines, they are not made the same as when you go into a sewing machine store. You can tell on some of them by the warranty will be less than half of a machine that's in the store, in the regular sewing store. But if you have a machine and you're back here and you have to pull this to make it go, that's just it's either a very cheap machine or it needs service, or it's maybe you had it handed down from someone and it's just worn out. I don't need, see, if I sit right here, you see my fabric's going. All my job is to steer. Sometimes I don't do a good job of steering, but the machine always does a good job of stitching. Okay, so we went down on one side. Now we're going to go back and just go down the same direction on the other side of the first stitching we did. Probably help if I hit the right. So if anybody and now we're going to turn, and now we're going to go in the other direction on the next marking line from the stitching we just did. If anybody has any questions or anything, go ahead and put them in the comments because I can see them, and I'd be happy to answer them as we're going along. So for those of you that are like to be quicker, obviously after this class uploads on YouTube. Oh, did I turn it and I wasn't supposed to? See that? Wasn't paying attention. You can always skip past these parts. But these classes on Saturdays are meant to be sew-alongs and not for maybe the speedy sew-along. So if you're watching it live, obviously you're going to have to wait. Though you can go ahead and stitch ahead and then, get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. But you can also just fast forward after it's up as a recording. And if I stitch too fast, then I'm losing all the people that are just trying to stitch properly. And I think I've got everyone done now. So I'll give you a minute to catch up, a couple minutes to catch up. So there's all my quilting. And now I'm just going to take it to the iron and get rid of those marks so that no one knows how off I might have been. So I don't know if we can see on that one, this one here. So my mark, oh, this one. My mark is kind of beside my stitching. That's okay. I'm okay with that. No one will ever know. Okay, so see, looks all nice and straight now because there's no marks there to show you that I went off the rails a little bit. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do when I'm done my quilting is I'm going to put my stitch length back to 2 for the seams, for when we do the borders going around. Oh, okay, so I have my machine ready. I try to always do that first, otherwise I'll forget. If you forget, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And let me move my machine over a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to leave my walking foot on. That's just fine. And I'm just going to wait a minute or two for everyone to catch up. Rhonda, how are you and Nancy doing? Are you both sewing? Or is this tag team? That'd be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Tag team. A friend of mine and I many years ago went to a sewing retreat, and she likes to cut fabric. Can't imagine why. She likes to cut fabric and not sew as much. I like to sew and not cut, so it worked out perfect. She did all the cutting. I was in heaven. I was in heaven. She was in heaven, and it worked out perfectly. So see, if you're tag teaming, you can do that. So we're going to go ahead and get our strips ready. So I want to make sure I don't use the wrong ones. So the two longer ones. So I got two longer ones, two shorter ones. Hold on, I gotta move my best press out of the way. Move my machine a little more. There we go. There we go. Okay, so this is what I do when I'm by myself, hoping that I don't mess up. Oh, good. Thanks, Rhonda. You guys are doing good. Christine, how you doing? So I always, when I have strips, especially for borders or sashing or stuff, before I grab onto one and think it's the right size, I'll either measure it with my ruler, or because I'm lazy most of the time, I only have two sizes, so I know I don't want my longer ones, so I can go ahead and set those right there. Okay? Good. Okay. Oh, Rhonda, you guys do swap tasks. That's pretty cool. Oh, watch this. Watch this. Now try this out. Let's see. Does it show? See, it says Rhonda says we do swap off tasks. I said tools, didn't I? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Isn't that cool? Now let me see if I can get rid of it again. Oh, there we go. And then here, Christine, she's doing good. I just wanted you to know that I wasn't lying, that she really is doing good. Lynn, I don't want you to feel left out. Do you want me to put up something for you? I can do this one. Not sewing today. And where's Stephanie? Stephanie's here, look. She's getting a pedicure. Hey, Steph, now look, you can take a picture with your camera, your phone, and show you getting a pedicure while I'm here sewing away like a slave. Just kidding. Okay. So are we all good? So now we're going to put on our two shorter strips. And shorter, I mean they should be the length of your center. If they're not, if they're a little longer, that's okay. If they're a little shorter, that's almost okay. Depending, if they're just a tad shorter, it's okay. Now, I'm gonna just put one on each side, left and right. Okay, just so I know I've got the right two. Now, because we're gonna sew this and flip it out, we need to turn this over, right side down, and we're gonna line up with the raw edge here, so the actual strip is on top of your center fabric. Okay, you got that all right? And we're gonna put a pin in. Now, today we're gonna live dangerously, because we're gonna do this one at the same time, not sew it at the same time, obviously, but we're gonna get it ready. Rather than pin this and sew it, and then come back and pin this and sew it, we're gonna pin them both, then sew each one, so we move along. Oh, Lynn, you're okay? All right. So again, right sides together, raw edges lined up over here. So your border fabric is on top of your center fabric, okay? And stick a pin in. I just put a pin in the center. I find as some of you will, if you're newest at watching me, I don't use a lot of pins because the more pins I use, the worse I get. I don't know if anybody's ever had that problem. So I'll wait a second for you to get your borders ready and make sure they shouldn't be going past these ends on either end, because these should be the two shorter pieces that you had. And if you wanted to, you could make this, you could make your center smaller. If you wanted to make a bigger pot holder, you can just add on and you can make your borders bigger. Whatever makes you happy is okay with me. I had to take a drink. I hope it didn't make noise. That doesn't sound good. I had to take a drink, It's non-alcoholic. I had to wet my whistle. I was getting dry. Okay, we ready to go? So back we go again. Now, you really want to have about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If it's a little more, it's better than a little less in this case, because we don't want to stitch too close to an edge, because then you'll tend to fray your fabric, okay? So I'll do mine. And you'll remember, if you have your walking foot on, your walking foot is wider than your regular foot. So if you use this edge as your guide, and you usually use the edge of, for example, in the baby lock, if you use the edge of your J foot, well, this walking foot is further out. So your seam allowance would be bigger. So I come in a little bit inside of the foot for my edge. And all you have to do is make sure whatever you pick on your foot to keep your eye on, to keep your fabric straight, just use it for all 4 sides. That's all that matters. You don't want to have a 1/2 inch one on one side and an inch, a 1/4 inch on the other side, because then your borders will be different sizes, which could be okay. Then you'd have to make them all different, so no, everyone would think you did it on purpose. So again, when I get near my pin's coming out back into the pin cushion, and I'm just holding my border fabric here. Look, that's all I'm doing, and steering. I lost my pedal here. There we go. And again, I don't need to lock my stitch, because we're going to be doing a seam all the way around. Now, if you're concerned that your stitching is going to come undone, you could do one, but you don't really have to. So I got kind of a wide, see how wide my seam allowance is? Can you see it here? See it right there? Okay. That's a pretty good size one. So if I fold this out, that's the size my border is going to be. And today, that's the size my border is going to be. And I'm just taking and finger pressing that for the moment, okay? I don't need to iron it yet. So now I'm going to do the other side, and let's hope I am aware enough to do the same size seam allowance. I'm sewing on my cutting table. That's what I use for filming, because my other table's down too far. And so I'm sitting down, like my arms are like, I'm below my machine. So I don't have the same view I normally do. Not that that makes any difference to whether I'm a straight sewer or not. Get into my pin. Make sure you take your pin out. And you see, the machine doesn't need my help. I'm just steering the boat. And looks like I got about the same seam allowance, let's hope. If I didn't, it would be okay, because it's a pot holder. not my prom dress. Okay, so I would go ahead and press this. So let me bring my little, so here's my little pressing mat. So I can show you how you press and not iron. So I want to make sure that I don't have a crease here or a crease here at the seam allowance or where the two seams meet. Oh, see if I can get my cord in the right place. So I'm going to press just going towards that seam. Okay, that's all I have to do. So let's see if I can. So can you see how that's raised up a bit? So I'm just pressing towards that seam allowance of that seam because that's so I don't get a little crease there. And then if I need to press any more, I'm just going to press. And press means press. This is ironing. This is pressing. Okay. Having the batting on it, so it won't have, you won't have as much issue. But if you kept ironing out, this border would start to bow because you're just stretching the fabric out. So I only ironed to that up to and a little bit over that seam allowance. I don't have to worry about this bowing because it's quilted down. Does that make sense to everyone? So go ahead and give your potholder a little press. And if you can see, can you see how this one's a little bit past? Doesn't matter. Because when I lay this, let me see if I can do it from this way. So this one's a little, oh, wait a minute, there we go. This pink border is just a tad past this center. But when I put my strip down, I'm going to line it up straight all the way down. And see how that's sticking out a little bit right there? I don't need to fuss with that and cut it and then cut my batting and have all kinds of issues. So I lined up going right down, and I'm keeping this nice and flat and straight. So I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that. I'm going to take my pressing mat off because otherwise I'll pin into the pressing mat. So I'm just going to put my pin in. And you notice when I pin, I don't do a lot of picking up. I just try to leave it flat, put the pin down in and through. I normally would have a cutting mat under here so I don't scratch my table. What did I do with my cutting mat? Oh, I told you it was on the floor, didn't I? Behind me. There we go. I have to get the twirly part set up. There we go. Okay. Now, when I stitch this, oh, well, that was good, wasn't it? When I stitch this, you see if I can get a little pin pointer. When I stitch this, we come from here. My foot, you know how I'm watching a certain point on my foot for my fabric to be. I'm going to ignore this little piece that's past. My eye is going to stay with the strip, the edge of the strip. Okay? Let's see if anyone has any questions on that. I'm going in the wrong direction here. If you move your twirling around mat, sometimes you have an issue. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put my other strip on. So remember, right side down. I might have a little extra. I'm just going to make it even, hanging over even. My raw edge of my center fabric and the raw edge of my strip are even together, and the rest of the strip is on top of the center fabric and on top of the border we already put on. And now you know why this strip needs to be longer, because we had to cover these borders as well. Okay? And the 9 inches is a little extra, and that's okay because we'll take care of that we'll take care of that whole thing in a few minutes. So again, I'm going to put another pin in. Okay, so now we just need to come down this side and then down this side. And it doesn't matter about down in one direction, up in the other. You're always going to sew so that this part of your fabric is to the left of your needle. You don't want to have all this fabric over on this side. All the fabric needs to be over there. Okay, so let's stitch this up. Let me check to make sure there's not any questions. Stopping at my pin, taking my pin out. I can see I went a little crooked there, but that's okay. I'm just going to go over and do the other side. Stopping at my pin. Okay. So now again, you want to fold that out and see how I'm pushing my fingers so I don't get that crease where that seam is. Turn it around. Do the same thing. Okay. Now I'm going to get my pressing mat. Move my machine out of the way there for a second. Okay, and I'm just going to give that a little press just like I did before. So I'm pushing towards that seam. Okay. Well, I'm on top of my twirling around mat at the same time. Again, just pressing from the center towards that seam, and then just press. Okay. So now we're gonna trim this up. Let's see if I can get. Oh, almost tipped the whole light over. Let me see if I can get back a little further, or up a little further. Hold on. I'm going to move my machine out of the way because this is it's more important for this. There we go. I don't think I can go back. Oh, wrong way. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Oh, sorry. Hold your eyes. Close your eyes a second. There we are. Okay. So I just want to, geez, you think that light would be a little brighter? It's right on it. Oh, okay. Okay. So I want to be so you can see all four sides. Now, this is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I had an 8-inch ruler, which I do somewhere, but we're not going to use it today. So the first thing I want to do is, can you see how this is hanging over and this is hanging over? You see all these little, see? Oh, you can see it good there. So I just want to get that all straightened out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of everything that is past. Generally, it's this first borders that we put on. Okay? So I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to turn it, let me see, turn it this way so you can see. I'll have to turn it again when I go to cut it. I don't want to be bleeding to death. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put my ruler And you can go ahead and do yours at the same time. I'm going to put my ruler so it's the edge of the first border we did, going along the edge. Now your edge might not be perfectly straight, that's okay. If you have, how do I explain this? You want to make sure that there's fabric under your ruler. So you don't want just batting, you want fabric, okay? The first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to find a line that's near where this seam allowance is. And I'm going to find a line that's near this seam allowance and one that's near this seam allowance. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my ruler over so that I'm along the edge of the first border we put on. And I've got fabric right to the edge of my ruler. Okay. Now you might have a little more fabric, but you don't want to have a little less. And then I'm going to follow one of these lines and see how straight it is to the border, to the seam of the two fabrics. And then I'm going to go across the top where these two fabrics along this seam line and try to get as straight as I can, and the same here. If it's not perfectly straight, it's okay. You kind of take a average of everybody. But I think because we did it on batting, you should be pretty good. Okay? And remember, it's a pot holder, it's okay. And I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. And I'm not going to take my hand off my ruler until I know that's trimmed off and I close my rotary cutter. Okay? And I'm going to flip around to the other side, and you can pick yours up if you want to, either way, because I don't know if you came prepared with a rotating mat, but I'm going to do the exact same thing. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push my ruler so it's at the edge, right at the edge of my ruler, my first border fabric on this side. Then I'm going to look across the top with some line on my ruler to see how it lines up with this seam. Now, you don't have to have the big dark line lined up because it isn't always going to work out that way. But you've got all those little dots in between, the 1/8 inch dots, that you can just pick one of those little dash lines and line up there, and one of the dash lines and line up there. And my excuse me, my long dark line, my 1-inch line, isn't exactly on the seam allowance, and it doesn't need to be, but I can see that it has the same distance away from that black 1-inch line. And remember, it's a pot holder. If worst comes to worst, just tell people you made it when you were in 6th grade. They don't need to know. Don't forget about the ribbon, because I almost forgot about the ribbon. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the other two sides, doing the exact same thing. I'm lining up my fabric. Now I've got a little fabric up at this end. I got more fabric showing past the ruler, but down at this end, I'm even with the ruler. I just have to make sure I don't have my ruler slanted. So that's why I'm going to pick one of the lines of the ruler to run it parallel to the seam of the border in the middle fabric. And I know this is a pot holder and it's not that big a deal, but this is exactly the same kind of thing you do when you're squaring up a quilt, or you're squaring up a table runner, or you're squaring up a placemat. It's the same idea. So this is a good place to practice that because it's smaller. It's always good to practice on something smaller. The other thing, don't forget, I want to look at my horizontal lines and see if they're okay. Now my dark horizontal line is about 1/4 inch from the seam allowance here, the seam allowance. That's okay, as long as it's even the whole way across. You're not going to always put your ruler down and every seam is going to line up with a dark line on your ruler. Let that go. And you notice I always make sure I get rid of, so I know I've done my cut before I move my ruler. I get rid of that excess. And here's our last one. First thing again, bring the ruler over so it is at the edge, excuse me, the edge of the ruler, edge of the fabric. Now, this time I can see more fabric, but I noticed I've got my ruler a little crooked because I checked my seam allowance. So I just have to move it. When I do, I still want to make sure that my horizontal is good. So see how I've got plenty of ruler. If I want to move up a solid line to my horizontal seam here, I can do that. So if you can get a solid line here and there, you'll be good. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. You just want to kind of, you don't want it way off on one side. You want it a little off on one side and a little off on the other side rather than way off on one side. If that kind of makes sense. I think it'll make sense when you're looking at it. Okay? So this is the size of my pot holder. What size is it? Doesn't matter. This is the size it's going to be. So it actually is, if you really want to know, it is about 8.5. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, it's actually square. Imagine that. That's pretty exciting right there. Okay. It's up to you to decide what size pot holder you want to have. I made some in the oh geez, I kicked the light. Hold on. I made some last week in our last week's pot holder, and I can't remember. I think this was my sample that I did beforehand. And and if you look at it, it's kind of rectangle. And here's the one I did when we sewed along. Can you see? One's kind of a rectangle. That's okay. I'm all right with that. It's pot holder. I'm good. Okay, so there's a difference in the size. Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. I'm okay. It's a pot holder. I know I've said that 500 times now. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is put our ribbon on. So we need about 6 inches of ribbon. I was just in a panic because I wasn't sure where my ribbon was. So this is 5/8, I believe. No, 3/8, I think. Yeah, this is 3/8. You could use, and it's grosgrain. I like grosgrain because I don't have to worry about it shedding a lot or raveling. So you could do 1/2 inch. You could make, you know how we had a strip left over? So maybe next time we do, I think we're going to do one more pot holder. Maybe next time, what they do with the strips. Like this strip, we had this strip left over. We could make this into a loop. So we could do that next time. And not use ribbon at all if you want to. It's just we've used a lot of time today, so I don't want to take up all the time for that. So we'll add a regular loop on, but for the most part, just find some ribbon and use that. I wouldn't use the satin ribbon. I'm not sure how that would hold up. So I want about 6 inches of ribbon. So I'm just coming across here. I don't have to be perfect because part of it's going to get trimmed away anyway. So I want to look at my pot holder and decide if there's any particular way that I want the top to be. Which part is the top? I think I'll go this way. So I want to put my loop up in the corner because that's what's going to hang. You could put it in the middle, I suppose, if you wanted to, but I'm going to hang I don't know, I always think of a pot holder having the loop on the side. So folding our ribbon in half, raw edges together, and I'm going to, let's see if I can come in a little ways without disturbing you too much. Here we go. I want to put this so that it just goes past the fabric. Can you see it? So it's just hanging off the fabric a little bit. So again, you want a longer pot holder, that's fine. If you want a shorter one, just move it this way, okay? But we want the fold inside on the pot holder, because if it's out here, it's going to be inside of the potholder when we turn it right side out. So when we turn it right side out, we want the ribbon to be, the loop ribbon, to be on the right side of the potholder. So I just have to get some tape. I don't want to pin it because if I pin it, number one, I could shred my loop, my ribbon. But number two, oops, sorry. I don't want to have a pin in here. So I'm going to back up again because I can't reach the potholder. There we go. So I'm going to fold this in half. All right, I need a piece of tape. And I use tape that we use for our embroidery machines, our embroidery project. So I always find it easier to get this folded and I stick the tape on. And then I just stick, so now I can hold it like this. I want that edge a little ways past, and I'm just going to put a piece of tape, and I'm just going to put the tape right here. So it's out of my way when I go to seam this up. But what I'm going to do is, just to make sure this little rascal doesn't try to play tricks on me, I'm going to stitch it down a little bit. And it's fine that I have my, walking foot still on. And I know I'm on an angle here, and I'll see if unfortunately I happen to have the white thread in so you could see this quilting. So I just need to take a few stitches about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of my potholder. I don't want to go too close to the edge because I'll just spray my fabric. So I don't know if you can see that. Oops, sorry. Where are we? Can you see how my little stitching is right there? See it? There you go, see it? So just a few stitches. I'm going to leave this tape on. If I'm not sure I'm out of the way, I'm just going to move my tape down a little further. I just want to make sure this guy doesn't decide to, flip over somewhere. So this is now stitched down. It's not necessarily stitched to keep it from falling, from ripping off after it's made, because pothole's made, we're gonna come around. But it's more to stitch it in place. But yes, it'll give it a little reinforcement there as well. So we got that done. Okay, now can I back up a little further? Okay, let me get the machine out of the way again. So now we've got our Insulbright to put on. Everybody cut their Insulbright? Okay, let me see if there's any questions. Okay, no questions? So now we have our Insulbright, and the Insulbright has metal flecks in it. And I don't recall, and you can read the instructions, which way they tell you to put it on, but I decided that the side that I can see most of the metal the most, for lack of a better way to say it, I want that side facing down. So I want that metal side that is the heat stopper. I want that to be before. So now if the heat is stopping here, I still got this that the heat can go through, and the battery that the heat can go through to help absorb more of that heat. Because these potholders aren't going to be like, those silicone oven mitts and stuff. They're not heavy. They'll work, but I wouldn't want to take a turkey out of the oven with one of these. You know what I'm saying? So I have my Insulbright down and my shiniest side is down. Okay, and I'm just centering it on putting my potholder on top and kind of centering it. So I should have some left over all the way around. And I'm going to put a couple pins in because I'm not out far enough to clip. If you're out far enough to clip, like maybe on this side, I'm close enough to the edge I can clip. There we go. I guess maybe I can. So I'm just going to put a clip on every side. Because sometimes it's hard to get the pin through. Now we've got Insulbright batting and fabric, okay? And what I'm going to do is I just want to stitch a little bit so it's holding it down. So when I put my back fabrics on, I don't have to worry about the Insulbright running off and doing funny things on me. So I'm just going to stitch like from here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here, about this much on each side. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be exact in the center in the same place. I more or less want to just hold this down so it doesn't scoot around when I'm putting my back fabric on. So I'm just going to stitch like from here to here, about 1/8 of an inch in, maybe a tad more. Don't go to the edge because what'll happen is your foot will keep going to slide off that edge. And we just need to stitch about, what is that, about 3 or 4 inches along each side. And we don't need to lock it because we're going to come in with a full seam allowance after that. Okay? So while I'm stitching that, if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat. And I'm making sure that I'm holding this all down because I don't want my fabric to curl up either. And having the walking foot on does make a difference, especially at this point. So see, I just went a little ways. And can you see that? See the little stitching right there? That's all I need. Because see, now that side's not going to get away. It's not going to run away on me. So maybe even about 3 inches. It doesn't even have to be perfectly straight as long as it's inside your seam allowance. So let's see if you can see. Oh, sorry. You can probably see the little indent there. That's the stitching. Okay. That one looks like about 2 inches. I got a little skimpy there, didn't I? I want to make sure I smooth that border fabric over so I don't end up having a bubble here, because once I tack this edge down, if this wasn't laid flat, there'd be like a lump there. I'll go a little further this time. There we go. So you see that little edge there. And if you look and go, oh, geez, those stitches are pretty small, because we're going through, in essence, we're going through 2 battings. So let's move our stitch length up that half point again. So I'm going to go to 3.0. And that's just so it doesn't get bogged down trying to make these little tiny stitches. And let's see if I can show you the difference. So I want to make sure I smooth this out. Oh, I have a foot down. Oh yeah, that's much better. That's much better. So let's see if you can, oh, sorry, gotta go this way. You see that stitching? So you'll notice the difference in the smoothness of, or it'll stitch along, the fabric will move quicker because the stitch now, your stitch now at 0.5 more than it was before, so 3.0 looks like the 2.5 stitch length that you usually have, and it's because the thread needs to get through all the layers. And so it needs more thread to take up the room so that the stitch itself is smaller. So we all stitched? Any questions? Because now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and I'm going to trim off the Insulbright, couldn't think of what was there for a minute, equal with my pot holder, but I don't want to trim my pot holder, so you just want to be careful. Again, make sure you line up and try to line up with that seam allowance like we did before, the seam allowance between the border and the center. Because as you're stitching with more and more thickness, things do change. Now, I've got my ribbon stitched, and if you can see, I have ribbon that hangs past the pot holder. I can trim that off now because I've stitched my ribbon in place. So it isn't gonna hurt anything. As long as you're not trimming the stitches off, then the ribbon will just fall off. And if you do that, you just have to get it back on there again. Okay, so now my Insulbright and everybody's lined up together. So now I'm ready to put my backing on. So my backing, I said it was going to be, the bottom was going to be 8 by 9. And that's just a guess because it depends what you trim to. So my pot holder is 8.5 by 8.5. So I'm going to make it, I'm going to go 8.5 by 8.5 for my big piece because I'm going to take a hem on this one. Okay, so let's see, I think I'll use my, I really don't want to use up my polka dot. I kind of like that. So I think I'll use this fabric if I have enough. I should have enough. Where did I put it? And of course, see, I was lazy and I didn't iron the whole thing. So while you're catching up with me and getting all trimmed up, I'm going to go ahead and press this. Is everybody doing okay? Does anyone have any questions before we put the pot holder together? Because once it's together, some things I can answer, but I can't show you. And I don't recommend using the little travel size iron for what you regularly iron because it gets hot enough. It just doesn't have weight enough to do the best job because the weight of your iron actually helps out with ironing your fabric, not ironing your iron. Okay. Let me check. Are there any questions? Everybody doing okay? Rhonda, Nancy, how you doing? Anybody need a minute to catch up? Or you may have your fabric already cut, so I'm going to go ahead and cut mine. So what did I say? I was going to go 8.5 by 8.5. I'm going to cheat because I have a ruler for that. Oh no, this is 9.5. Well, that's all right. That'll work. So I am gonna go. So I have a 9.5 inch rule. I'm sorry for the, was that like, is that this light? Okay, hold on. Where can I put that? It's not so bothersome. Hold on. I know it's still over in the corner, but that's why it's blinding me. So I have a 9.5 inch square ruler and I need 8.5. So I'm taking an inch off the fabric. And so I'm going to get it correct on two sides. So now I only have to cut two sides. That makes sense? And I'm running into everything here on my table. Scissors. Hopefully when you're sewing at home, you're not as squished for room as I am. Though I know on any occasion we're always squished for room. Okay, don't do as I do now. There we go. Okay, so let me do my, let's see if we have some questions here. Oh, good. You're good, Christine? You're good too? So this is my bottom piece of my back, which is this part here. So rather than have this raw edge, with this raw edge is fine, but if you washed it a lot, it would ravel, okay? So what I'm gonna do is, and again, it's gonna, let me see, so you were gonna go 9 by 9, I believe. So we're just gonna fold it down roughly an inch. And what we wanna get is, and I'm gonna show it to you on this side. So if I put this on here, you see how it covers the whole pot holder? So when I sew all the way around, I wouldn't be able to turn my pot holder right side out. So I want to fold this down about an inch, maybe just a tad more. Do you see how I am? And I don't have to be perfectly straight because it's going to be hidden inside. But I'm going to get it pretty straight. I'll try my best. I mean, if we try and it's not straight, that's okay. But if we just don't try at all, that's not so good. So I have finger pressed this, but I'm going to press it with the iron. Okay, so now I know that when I sew all the way around for my seam allowance, I've got this little opening right here. Does that make sense? So now I need another piece, and I had said the top needed to be 6 by 9. In my case, I only need to be 8.5. If I did it 9, I just have to trim it. So now I want a piece that is 6 by 9. So let's see, what ruler shall I use? So I'm going to come over to this side here. And I need it 6 by 9. So my ruler, this square up ruler is 9.5. So I'm going to have the half hanging off over here off the fabric. Oh, man, let me turn it this way. Had to get my halves in the right place. Okay, so I'm off the half. So I've got 9 this way. And I want to come up to this. Can you see this? I'm coming up to this end, and I'm just going to get rid of this piece after. So if you can see, let me see if I can hold it up. Okay, so if you can see along here, it's not straight, plus I got this extra piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it 6.5, and then I'm going to come over and trim this side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5. Okay, so I'm lining up. I know you can't see it right there, but because I got to cut it. But I'm lined up on this side that's all crooked, I'm taking the skinniest part and lining up the 6.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, because I'm going to count twice. And then I need to be, oh no, I need to be 8.5, not 9, don't I? So I need to come another half. It's a lot of math, isn't it? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5. Okay. If this edge wasn't straight, I would cut 9 and then I would fix that edge. I'm kind of trying to show you like how it is in the real world when you're home alone and trying to make the most of your fabric and trying to work from a little ruler. It pays to have some bigger size rulers. I would say you want an 8.5, 8.5 by 8.5, and you want at least probably a 12.5 by 12.5. If you do a lot of quilting and you're going to square up your own quilts, you want one of those big, like 20 something by 20 something. They're very expensive, but they really work well for what you're doing. So 8.5, and I went 6.5 because I got to square up, straighten out this side of this fabric. And now this time I pay no attention to whether I'm using the long side, the short side, like I told you this earlier. And my rotating mat fell off the rotating. That's clever, isn't it? So I gotta line myself up again. That I ran into the sewing machine. Okay, so I want to be 8.5, 6.5. So I just need to come along here. And you notice I try to always take the fabric away before I move the ruler. So if you can see how I got all this hanging off here? And that's why I went the 6.5, because this side wasn't straight. So now I can go to the 6. And hopefully that makes sense to you. So even though I can read the numbers, I still do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I know this side is straight because I was working off a piece that had been cut off before. And I would just cut that off and save this piece in my save the pieces pile. Okay. Are we all together again? So now this is going to be this part right here. So wrong sides together, we're going to fold it on the long way. So I still have, this needs to be the width of your pot holder. So I wouldn't want to fold it this way because then, that isn't going to work. Okay. So when you fold something and you're not sure, in this case, we're folding wrong sides together, but you would go ahead and fold it and you go, okay, I know this piece belongs here. Oh, look, it fits. I'm good to go. So just double check yourself rather than guess or get upset or make a mistake, because we make enough mistakes anyway. So let's try to avoid a few if we can. So I'm going to press this. It's pressed in half. So now I have a folded edge here. So I've got that little folded over edge, that little hem on this one. If I wanted to stitch it, I could, but I'm not. It's folded over, so that will help with the having it ravel, because when we come by this way with the seams, it's going to hold that fold over in place. If you want to stitch it, go ahead and just take this piece and go ahead and stitch across there right now. Okay, now here's the part you want to make a little note of, because I always forget. So what I want to, I'm going to be putting this on top. I'm going to put the backing on top of this. I need the pot holder to be face up with the insole bright is down, because this works better against the feed dogs. The feed dogs will feed that through just fine. Okay. And I want to make sure, remember I've got my ribbon in place. So what you have to think about is this fabric has a wrong side and it's got to go right side down. Now, if I put this down first and then I put this down, when I turn it right side out, this fabric, the longer fabric would be on the outside. I don't want that. I want this piece to be on the outside. Excuse me. Let me get a drink. Time to take a sip of water. Okay, so I double folded smaller piece at the top. I want the raw edge aligned with the raw edge. The raw edge is aligned here. So in my case, I've got a little extra. So I'm just going to trim a little bit off just to make it easier. And I want to make sure I stay straight. So I want my ruler line to be along my fold. If you do that, just don't trim off too much. Okay, so I want this down first. And let me show you, let me turn this back inside out. And this is the same exact back that we did last week, in last week's. So when I turn this inside out, I can easily see this is on the top, right side down, this is on the inside. So you might want to keep one pot holder around so in case you need to do that. But just make a note. And trust me, you'll do it wrong. Ask me how I know that. Oh, I didn't poke my end back out. There we go. Okay? Oh. So, smaller folded piece, the one that's doubled over. Fold is facing in towards the center of your pot holder. Raw edges lined up and lined up. I'm going to put a clip here because I'm way too thick now to be putting pins in. It would help if I had it going evenly across there. So clip here, oh, clip here. And you know, your clips have a right side and a wrong side. So the color side, so if you have a clear one, you won't know. One side is curved, the other side is flat. And it's meant to be flat going this way. So when it feeds on your machine, this flat should be on the bottom of your machine, so it's just a little smoother. Okay, now I can't see past there, so I have to turn around and make sure. I want to make sure that everybody is lined up here. Let me do it this way because I can see better. Okay, we got that top on. Now we're going to take our other longer back. Here's our fold. So we don't want to put the fold down here. We want the fold up on the, I'm going to call it the good end, on the open end, right side down, pretty side down. Okay, it should not, this piece should not be up where you can pin it because this is where we're going to turn it right side out. Okay. Again, I want to line up those edges, the raw edges. I'm going to put one clip up here, right where that fold is. Okay. I'm going to put a clip over here. And I want to try to be as straight here as I can. Now this won't show because it's going to be inside, but I still want to have it as straight as I can. Okay. And then I just need to come along the bottom, and I just want to make sure everybody's nice and smooth. That's a lot of clips for me. Okay. Now, I might have, let me turn it over. So I'm going to turn it over and look from this side to make sure that, if nothing else, the back fabric is showing here, but I don't want to be short anywhere, so that when I stitch it, I want to make sure this is nice and flat and smooth. Because when you clip from the front, you're not always smooth on the back. So I want to make sure the back is smooth. Okay. So all I did was just smooth this out. I just I unclipped a little. I didn't move my clip. I just squeezed it open and made sure that everything was flat. And then I'm back to this side again. And I just want to be careful that everybody's as flat as can be. Okay, remember it's a pot holder. It's okay if it's not perfect. Okay, so I'm going to get this guy. Let me move some of my stuff here. Don't need to have everything in the way now. There we go. Move my machine in a little closer. Let's see if I can turn a little more towards you. All right, remember I'm on my 3.0 now on my stitch length because I got a lot of stuff to go through. Okay, let me check for any questions before I go any further. I wonder how Stephanie's doing with her pedicure. Okay, so I'm going to be sewing all the way around. I'm not going to start at a corner. I never start at a corner. I'm going to start like down in the middle somewhere. It isn't going to matter because we're going to stitch all the way around. There's no opening that we have to later on figure out how we're going to hand stitch it closed so it doesn't look like we hand stitched it closed. We're going all the way around, but we're going to take our time doing it because we've got a lot of fabric. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go around. But when I come around this way, I got to be careful of this, our big back fabric, not flipping over on me, okay? Or on us, okay? So I don't want to start right there and have that issue. So I'm going to start here. I don't need to lock it because when I come around, I'm going to come over those stitches and then lock it. Make sense? And I'm going to take about the same about the same seam as I did before. So I might not want a 1/2 inch. If you want to do a 1/2 inch seam, that's fine. You might want to start out with a bigger pot holder to begin with. So that, because a 1/2 inch seam is pretty good. And I prefer, personally, I prefer a 1/2 inch seam. It's easier to sew a 1/2 inch seam when you have all this thickness than it is a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to go somewhere between the 1/4 and the 1/2 using the edge of my foot as my guide. So is everybody ready? You ready to go? Here we go. I'm going to take my clips out as I get to that point. I got to move in a little closer. Can't quite reach there. And I'm going to hang on to my end here, keep all my ends together as much as I can. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to stop. This is going to be your hard part. I want to stop about where, when I turn, I'm going to take this clip out because it's in my way, so that when I turn this, I'm using that same edge, that same spot. So if I need to stitch and stop and turn, make sure if you don't have pivot, you put your needle down before you lift your foot up, okay? And you want to try to keep as straight as you can, because you don't want, if you have a crooked seam allowance, depending how much it is, you'll have like a, well, you won't have an octagon, you might, but you don't want to have it wider on one end than the other of your potholder. And again, you see, I've got my fingers at this edge. I'm going to move this clip out of my way. So I'm making sure everybody's smooth, making sure the underneath is smooth. And you will get a little push of this top fabric may go past where your original fabric was. That's okay, because we're going to trim this seam allowance down. So again, you want to come near the end. Okay, so I need to go a little bit more because I have way more fabric here past my foot. So whatever my eyeball point was that I'm using for my guide, I want to get there. So it's better to stop early. Just take another stitch, look, maybe one more stitch, look, okay, and then turn. Oh, I got a piece of thread that's about to get stitched in. Blue thread of all the, not sure where that came from. And again, having that pivot, it gives you a chance to, you stop, your fabric can all relax, you can get it kind of smoothed out again, because it's almost like a snow plow pushing that fabric forward, because you've got those two battings plus two fabrics. In some places you're going to have four fabrics where you fold it over. I'm coming up to this hem, see my hem right here? So I got to be careful that my foot doesn't fold this over. And that's where my pivot is going to come in handy again, because I'm going to go a little ways and stop. And when I stop, and if you don't have pivot, you stop, put your needle down, pull your foot up a little bit, just so you can ease the edge of this hem underneath. And even if you had stitched across, unless you stitched way down this end, you still would have that pull, that flip up on you. And again, I'm coming to my corner. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to try to guess, and try to guess sooner than later. Turn it. I need to go more, so I'm going to go one more stitch. I need to go one more stitch. You see how that pivot comes in handy? It's really nice. Okay, and then I'm going to stitch around again. My whole foot and everything is not running into this bottom fabric. It is pretty thick. And again, smoothing, smoothing. Coming up on the next end. Let's stop. Okay, I need to go more. One more. Okay, now I'm going to be coming up to this piece that can flip over. So I'm just going to take my time. As I get closer, I'm going to let go of take my foot off the pedal, let the pivot work. So if I need to, I can make sure that this hem is flat down. Again, if you don't have a pivot feature, just put your needle down before you pick your foot up. And you just need to pick your foot up a little bit to see, to get everything situated. And then I would just go a little more just to make sure I got that. Okay, we're good. And now I'm aiming for right where I stitched to begin with, because I want to stitch over that exactly. Okay. If I'm not exact, I want to be inside, which is over to the right in the seam allowance, more than outside, because if I'm outside, it'll make like a little pleat almost. So I'm just going to take my time. I'm going to use my pivot. If I start to get a little hump, I am going to I'm not back here because I'm going to do it from this side. I'm not back here. I can't, my foot's in the way. I'm not back here pulling the fabric. What I'm doing is, or pulling the fabric to stitch. I just want to make sure that I lose that little bump I have. So I'm kind of stretching the fabric. I'm not pulling it to stitch. I'm just pulling it to make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, I'm aiming for that stitching. And then I'm going to lock it. So you can do 3 forward, 3 back. You can lock in place. A lot of you have a little button for that. Okay, so let me move the machine out of the way. Way out of the way this time. Okay, so now we're right here. I'm just going to stop for a second. I'll put my little clips away so you can catch up on, because I'm not sure if you're caught up with me or not. So since this is our last part, we don't need to rush. I'll just put my clips away and you finish up. Take your time, finish up, because I know you stop to watch me while I'm sewing. So you're going to be a little bit behind where I am. Don't feel bad. And so I'll remind you while I'm thinking of it. So this is on YouTube, and it'll be on YouTube, and I'll have a playlist for I don't know, easy projects, maybe easy projects. I'll do something, but it'll go up. It goes up and loads up through YouTube. Nothing to do with me. After it goes up on YouTube, I have to wait probably till tomorrow, and I can cut that little portion in the front in the beginning. If we didn't today, we didn't have much talking. I usually go on about 10 minutes early or so, and I was probably 5 minutes late. So if I need to edit any of that out at the beginning, it'll be all out so that you don't have to sit through the quietness or the checking the sound and all that. But it takes a couple days for that. Okay, so now we're all done. Looks pretty nice, doesn't it? So now we need to trim this up because we don't want this big, thick seam allowance. So I'm going to get my big scissors. You could do it with a rotary cutter, but it's an awful lot of stuff to go through. And I find I end up making it look like I took the weed whacker to it. So, and again, don't have to be perfectly straight. And I'm going to cut a little of this, and then I'm going to show you how much I cut. I want more than an eighth, less than a quarter. So let's see if I can show you. So this is what I took off. Can you see what's left there? Okay. I know, probably by the time your eyes focused, I took it away. That was kind of mean of me. And then I'm not gonna trim my corners yet, but I'm just gonna keep going around. And again, it doesn't have to be, it's hard to cut scissors holding up in the air. But I find using a bigger pair of scissors or shears, but is it scissors over 8 inches long or shears? You can add that into your little bits of knowledge in case someone should ever ask you. Okay, so you notice I have to clean as I go. Can't help myself. Okay, so now, oh, so you can see it there. How's that? That looks pretty good. You can see that one. That one probably shows the best. So that's less than a quarter, more than an eighth. Don't have to be perfect. I just don't want you to get butt right up against those stitches. In this case, I wouldn't because of all the stuff that's inside. So now I'm going to trim my corners. because I don't need all of this corner in the corner. So I'm going to come across on the angle. Let me do, show you this one because it shows better. There. Can you see how I went across at that angle? So I'm closer to the corner stitches than I am here and here, but I'm still a bit away from the edge. Oops, sorry. Oh, there you go. How's that? Besides, my hand is so dry, I need to put some lotion on. You see that? Okay, so we want to do all 4 corners. Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to get out a ruler and measure across. We're just getting rid of the bulk of that fabric. Because there's fabric, there's batting, there's Insulbright, there's more fabric, there's double fabric on this side. You know, it's a lot. Okay, so normally at this point, with your big iron, I don't have my big iron going, but at this point with your big iron, I mean, you know, not your big girl iron, but a regular size iron, you just want to press. Okay, just press. Then let it cool for a second. Don't press and pick it up hot. Just let it cool for a second. Relax. We got to start slowing down. I want to check to see if there's any questions before I turn this right side out. So see how we got all of this to work turning it right side out. Isn't that grand? Instead of trying to turn something right side out from this one, like, you know, like a given birth. So there we go. So we're going to go right side out. And we're going to do this. We have to do this twice because this is just turning one fabric right side out. And somewhere I have a point turner. I really wish you ladies would make sure I have everything I need before I start, especially on my work day. So point turner, chopstick, I guess. Chopstick isn't always the best. They don't make chopsticks like they used to. So you want to just press out this, poke out this point. Don't want to use scissors. And what you generally want to do is make sure your pointer is like in that seam allowance if you can get there. And just do it slowly because you start jabbing it. Next thing you know, you're going to see the point of your point turn. Doesn't have to be like perfectly square corner. Okay. So not pretty yet, but at least we know we've got it right because this guy was first. And now we just have to turn over the top part. And this one, can you see how much point I don't have there? So I'm not going to put the point turner in yet. I'm going to use my finger. And I have no fingernails, so don't tell me that you can't do it because you have no fingernails. But I want to push it out as much as I can before I start poking it's not a pointy object, but it's pretty pointy. And I'm working on this back fabric first, and then I can kind of go under the seam allowance to the other one. I think that'll make more sense to you when you're doing it. If you start seeing your stitches, you know you've done too much. Okay, we want to make sure we take this tape off. And look, we can use this tape again. And rather than stick it on your machine, because I see so many of you have like 15 yards of stuff stuck on your machine, just put it back on the roll that's where it came from. Put it right back there because it'll keep its stickiness better on the roll where it came from than it will if you stick it on your machine and you're going to take more of the sticky out. Okay, so we've got a question here. Why press on the inside? Okay, so when you're sewing anything, garment, quilt, whatever you're sewing, Before you do anything with that seam, you press that seam, and that sets the stitches into the fabric better. And you'll notice sometimes when you're stitching, do you notice sometimes it's a little puckery, a little bit puckery? Well, if you press that, when you press that, it'll help flatten that out. And I learned a long time ago, I knew someone that was like a perfect sewer, but she never pressed. And I had someone in my class that wasn't a perfect sewer, but she always pressed. And the person that wasn't the perfect sewer, but pressed, her project, garment, whatever it was, looked better than the perfect sewer that didn't press. That's how important pressing is. Pressing will make adequate sewing look even better. It'll make it more perfect than a perfect sewer that doesn't press. Does that make sense? Okay, so when you press this, and again, I'd use my regular line, but look, have you got your potholder done? So let me see if I can, I'll try it with my little iron, but I don't expect, what I want to have is, I don't want the back, can you see it? I don't want the back showing on the front. Can you see? Can you see that there? So when I press this particular thing, I'm gonna kind of press and push a little bit this way so that I'm pushing the front over the back a little bit. Okay, so I've got my, maybe you can you see here? You see how the pink on the back is showing? Can you see that at all? So I don't want it showing. It would be nice. I got my iron all tangled up here. Oh, okay. It would be nice if you did that and it looked even all the way around, but it never does. So I just push that a little that way. And then I'm going to press. And I want to really press good, and I always use steam because I need to flatten some of that seam allowance business going on there. So I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to come over to this side. So I'm really concentrating on pressing the seam allowance part. Now this one I could see that back, so I just pushed it, I'm not like ramming it over, I'm just pushing lightly. Hey, this potholder feels really nice. And you don't want to iron it so much that, you know, it's not a potholder anymore. I can come to the back, and if I I'm going to take my hand here, and I'm just pulling the back fabric away from the edge. And just be careful of your ribbon because you don't want to melt that. And you're saying, why would you have a ribbon on potholder that can melt? Because I don't use the ribbon when I'm using the potholder. It's on an edge that isn't on there. So I just kind of persuaded this fabric to be in a little bit. And I don't mind if I can see my front fabric on the back because it'll be fine. But you can almost see where your seam allowance is. And see, I'm not pressing in here so much as I'm just trying to press that seam allowance a little flatter so it's like the rest of the potholder. That kind of makes sense? And don't spend the day on it. It's a potholder, not your prom dress. But you see, I'm not all ironing all over the place. And if I had a heavier iron, I would be fat. It would be faster. Okay, so there's our pot holder. Isn't it pretty? So I believe, well, let me see. I was going to say, I believe I put you know what I'll do on Facebook. If you use Facebook, Miss Loreens Schoolhouse Facebook page, I'll go ahead and post this pot holder with a little, few words, and then under the comments, go ahead and put your pot holders. And if you make more over the next few days, weeks, post them there because people like to see all the different fabrics you used and they can ooh and ah over it. So be sure to share it with everybody. Oh, Christine, you're all done? Good for you. Well, you said I'm done, so I'm not sure. Well, okay, I'm not sure if she's done as in she can't take anymore or if she's done as in she finished her project. So I'm going to take it as you finished your project. So there we go. I think I'm going to do one more pot holder next Saturday and I will post it on Facebook. It's just been a busy week, so I think I wanted to do 3 so that for Christmas gifts or visiting friends gifts or gifts for yourself, whatever, you have different options of pot holders. I didn't want to do a pot holder and then wait 3 or 4 weeks and do another one and you go, oh, wished I'd known about it. So we're doing the pot holders, right? I think 3 times, and then we're going to do. I think we have some towel toppers, napkins, placemats, things like that. Just things to pretty up your house, get ready for Christmas, Thanksgiving, or just because you're having a good time. And they're fairly simple things to make. And if it doesn't come out perfect, it's okay. So here's my 2. I think this guy's probably bigger than this one. Oh, look, see? See, they're not the same size. It's okay. Even if I had them, I wouldn't. But if I had these hanging together and they aren't the same size, nobody knows that they're not supposed to be the same size. They might think that you got a set, a big one and a medium one. So don't let any of that stuff ever worry you about, oh, it's not the right size or it's not perfect or whatever the case may be. Oh, thanks, Rhonda. Thanks, Nancy. Did she have a good time as well? And don't forget, Thursday night, YouTube, my YouTube channel, um, Thursday nights at 7, we're just working with cutting machines. So whether you have an Accuquilt cutter, Gemini, or you just want to sew along, we're just working on some basic quilting blocks. We got one more week of practice, and then we're going to work on a table runner that you can make whatever size you want to make it. And stitch along with it. So thanks for all joining in. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to the channel. And I believe if you click on the little bell that's next to it, you'll get notified when a new video goes up or I go live. I'm going to try this week and figure out how to put up like a, coming tomorrow at 10 or coming tomorrow or whatever, you know what I mean, one of those pre pre-announcements of when it's coming up. Oh, Christine said she did complete her project. Great job. Oh, and Nancy completed hers too. Great job. So be sure to take pictures and I'll get the post up. What's today, Saturday? Probably tomorrow. And then you can put all your pot holders there and everybody can see everyone else's because you kind of did it as a group. So you'll be together. And I was going to say something else and I forgot. Oh, so next Saturday will be at 1. I only have to do 1:30 once a month when I do an embroidery class, machine embroidery class. So that's the only time I get held up. So next Saturday at 1, next Thursday at 7 p.m. And I think that's all I have so far. And in between them, I try to put up a video. I'm going to try to put up a video or 2, just little short ones that aren't live, but it might have some information. If you have if you have suggestions about what you'd like to see or what you'd like to do. Oh, thanks, Lynn. Um, just, let's see, where would we put that? You can't go in the chat after it's done. Maybe over in the Facebook comments, in the potholders or the next class or something. I try to read them all right away, as fast as I can. So again, thanks everyone. I'm just going to wait one more second. I think everybody finished it, so they didn't have any questions. And I'm going to just pause at the end here in quiet because you're on a delay from me, and I always worry that I'm going to cut you off. So have a great day. Have a great weekend, what's left of it. The sun is out here in New Hampshire. It is a cool 67 degrees, which is nice weather. Okay, so I'll see everyone sometime next week. Thanks again. Bye.